174 animals are farmed and fished every year for the average diet, according to Vox in their article, The Difference You Make When You Eat Less Meat. This is 174 individual animals creating emissions and pollution and harming the environment for a single person's diet every single year. This is impactful because one of the leading contributors to climate change is livestock and agriculture. And one of the most important ways that we as individuals can help combat climate change and reduce our own personal carbon footprints is by reducing the amount of meat we eat and reevaluating our relationship with meat in our diets. So to better understand this, let's look at how eating less meat will reduce emissions, reduce waste, and reduce deforestation. The first point is that eating less meat will reduce emissions. The BBC in their article, Climate Change, Do I Need to Stop Eating Meat? Says that 14% of all man-made emissions comes from the livestock sector. A lot of these emissions are methane, which is actually 34 times more damaging for the environment than carbon dioxide, which is the gas we typically think of when we think of greenhouse gases. The Guardian in their article, Meat Accounts for Nearly 60% of All Greenhouse Gases from Food Production, states that meat and livestock agriculture produce twice the amount of pollution that plant-based food does. This is because livestock need vast amounts of food, water, and land in order to be raised, and because the production in order to make livestock edible and safe for consumption is a lot more intensive and creates a lot more emissions than plant-based food does. This is important because emissions create the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere, which warms our planet and contributes to things like the polar ice caps melting and sea levels rising, as well as a lot of other detrimental effects. Eating less meat will also reduce waste. The University of Colorado Boulder, in their article Waste in the Meat Industry, says that 60% of an animal raised for meat has to be recycled or disposed of. That means more than half of an animal raised for human consumption is considered waste. It's also stated in the article that the meat industry waste is 5 to 10 times as strong as domestic sewage. In the article, What Happens to Animal Waste by Foodprint, they expound on this, saying that waste seeps into the groundwater and causes things like dead zones, which are bodies of water where there's no longer any oxygen to sustain life. They also talk about how 3/4 of the country's ammonia pollution comes from livestock. This is important because when waste is put into our environment, it impacts the local flora and fauna and makes it so that the environment can become hostile to local flora and fauna. The next point is that eating less meat will cause less deforestation. The Eurogroup for Animals says that agriculture is the top source of deforestation at 40%. That rises to 65% in the Amazon. Our World in Data says that half of the habitable land in the world is used for agriculture, which causes biodiversity to decline. They also state that 70% of global fresh water is used for agriculture. This is important because forests act as carbon sinks. So instead of the emissions going into the atmosphere and contributing to the greenhouse effect and warming our planet, they are held into the plants and in the forests, making it so those emissions don't go into the atmosphere. So it's important to remember that eating less meat will reduce emissions, reduce waste, and reduce deforestation, and that as individuals, one of the most impactful ways that we can stop climate change is by reducing our meat eating. Greenpeace, in their article, Eating Less Meat and More Plants to Help the Environment, states that as people, we need to become more meat conscious and more aware of the impact that our diets have on the planet, and become aware of the steps that we could take to reduce our own emissions and help combat climate change, which is to eat less meat. Thank you.